Hi, Anna Meyer here again, and this time it's to look at the advanced version of the top-down map, the layered version this time. And we have the islands here as an example. The basic version, to start with that, it's only one layer. That's the image, and you can basically use it to whatever you want to in your game, but the layered version gives you a lot of chance to easy customize your content. You can put roads, buildings, and stuff where you want it. You can even flatten the terrain if you want to. You can easily just repaint the texture and still keep the the view of hills and the shading is separate. So in this little short introduction video, I'm going to show some the basic features of the layered map. And here we have this is the full resolution image. So this is almost 30,000 pixels. So I can zoom in here. I can zoom in way into so you can see the detail, and we can see individual buildings and even individual trees, and we can see the roads and some of the stuff that is in this on this little island. And the layers I have here are it's a number of different ones. So, but I'm going to start from the top, not from the maybe the most logical, but how it's built from the top down. And the first layer we have is shading. So let me zoom out a little bit here, and we can take an area that have some hills here that we can actually see it. This is the shading area, and if I hide the shading layer, then you see we get a flat file. And this is just the colors, just the textures. And then the second layer from the top is the forest. Then I can simply remove all the forest. And then in order to see the other layers, I have to zoom in here a bit. I have to zoom in quite close here. So we see here we have buildings, and there's some ruins, and there's like some sort of tower or fortress or little castle or something there. And so I can turn off the buildings. And then if I go even further, we can turn off the roads, on or off the roads. And then I have one that I called boardwalks. Is for big wooden constructions like like boardwalks and defensive works and stuff that are. I wanted to separate them from the general buildings. You could have made them into two and then just painted them with different colors. But also the boardwalks here are. I want to shade them a little bit different. The buildings are have a little bit cast a little bit more shadow than the low boardwalks do. So I can turn off the boardwalks, and then what we're left with is just the texture layer. That's the color of the landscape. And the beauty of this is that you can actually repaint the texture and still keep things like forests and shading in place. So if you look this, if I think these mountains are, I want to have more like a gray granite look to it. I can actually take this and I can take the sponge tool that is desaturate and make it a little bit bigger like this, and simply go in and just to be sure I create a copy of the layer. So I make a copy. So one of the advice is don't paint on the original layer just in case you don't like it. So I make a copy, and then I go in and just desaturate it here. And like you see, I can remove the color of the rocks and just make them more flat gray. Or I can tweak them into whatever color I want. And without touching the shading at all. And I don't change the colors of the trees in any way. I can just simply go in here and tweak the colors of the rock. And you will also tweak the colors of the grass. But there are ways around it, and that's using masks. But then we move into the way more advanced than the what's the purpose of this one. But you can create mask by masking a certain color or some, so you can create your own masks afterwards if you want, or before, so you can actually mask things like blue and so on. But that's basic Photoshop knowledge, so that's beyond the scope of this one. But this way you can change the texture without changing the shading. But you can also say that, for instance, we find a little hill here somewhere. You can actually remove the shading too, and that's if you go in here and there is a shadow layer here. You can create a mask, and then you can just create a little tool here. So yeah, and then I switch the color to black, and then I can just go in here and basically paint away the shading to even things out, and I can remove the hills and stuff. So that's a way of just flattening the ground like this. That will create the neutral. So there's a lot of so you can basically turn things on and off. So that's the shading, but I'm going to delete the layer mask so we get the shading, because I don't want to touch the shading anymore. I keep that as it is now. But now we go to forest. You can use this layer to if you want more trees in an area. If I, for instance, say I want to have this little opening here, I don't want to fill that with trees, I can just use the clone tool and make sure I use the current layer, and then I'll take some trees over here, and you can paint in the color from somewhere else. But then you see that you don't get the shading to come in. In order to do that, you need to go to the shading layer and do shadow and take some area and then just paint in like this. And now I need to increase the opacity and flow of this tool, and I can just go in here and paint over. That way I created forest in an area that wasn't, and vice versa. I can just go in and delete the color, or paint over, take an area like here and remove forests if I want to create a hole here. So I just remove this bit here from the shadow layer, and then I go into the forest layer, and I can just do this too. And sorry, not that way, but what we do is I can either use a mask, that's probably the safest, or I can just use an eraser and simply go in and erase away the trees like this, and then I create an opening in the forest layer. But now I want to go back and undo the eraser and undo. There we are. So you can play with these layers too. So you can adjust the forest separately from the texture. It's a little bit of work, but it's usually fairly manageable as long as it's in a limited area. And then we have buildings. So if I turn on buildings here and go in, buildings already have a mask. So, and that's this layer. If I disable the layer mask, you see you get this kind of weird red gray pattern, and that's just a pattern I created to get a variety of rooftop colors. And in order to create buildings or remove buildings, you make sure you select the mask, go into, take your paint tool, and I have a small building brush, and that's basically just a 1 pixel sharp brush, and I can create, so I have black and white. And if I paint with white, I create buildings, and if I paint with black, I remove buildings. So if you want to create some more houses here in the middle, I can just go in here and start painting houses. This is probably a little bit too zoomed in. I do this, then it looks kind of easier, so I can just create, and that didn't look good, so I'll step back a bit here. But if I want to see the roads, I can just do it. And then I realized I painted these two buildings just on the road, so I want to get rid of them. So I just switch to a white color, and I can just erase them, and then switch back to black, and I can create tiny buildings, or maybe a little bit larger building here, and maybe there's an inn or something in the corner here, and a little bit of a round building here, and a elongated, really long building here, some warehouse or something. So that way you can paint buildings back in and out, so to speak. You can create buildings or erase buildings. This scale is 10 feet per pixel, so that means that it's barely buildings are barely visible. So in order to do building, you should probably have an even higher resolution. But this project, I tried to squeeze the most out of, make what was possible to do on a country scale, on a really wide scale, like a large area map that could actually encompass information even down to building level. So you have things like stone circles and maybe a graveyard or some monument of religious nature or something up here. But what you can do if you want to change the colors of the buildings, I don't want all these to have red tile. I want some of them to be more kind of just grayish, for instance. Then I select not the mask, but I select the layer itself, and I can go in here, use the sponge tool, and simply just paint over it, and that will remove the color. Or I can use a regular brush and just go in here and select whatever color I want. For some reason, I want to have, maybe they have some blue-gray tile. I go in here and create some blue-gray, they have some bluish tile here. Then I can go in here and just paint a little bit bigger, and I make sure that's is selected, and thanks to the mask I can just repaint the buildings, and now they will have a blue-gray tile, all the buildings under it. So that's how you can quickly shape where buildings are. You can get the right color of their roofs, and this is barely visible with buildings. So it's a great map for getting a good view of your barony or some larger area. It's not perfect for city mapping, but it is what it is right now. It's an interesting tech demo, this, to see what's possible. And then you have roads. They basically work the same way. I go in here and I select the brush, and I have a road brush already set, so I can just, let's see what we have here. We have an area. I can just go in here and create a new piece of road that goes down here to some, and then I can create some more buildings, and I can paint over the texture with some more field-like things. So that's how it works. And I realized, nah, I don't, so I can just like the road there, so I can just paint the road on and off. So this is what you can do. You can, thanks to the layers, you can actually easily customize the map, the space map, into whatever you want. You can remove buildings, you can add roads, you can twist the where you want, change where you want to have forest and stuff, and you can repaint things. If an area is burned, you can just desaturate the whole area or washed out black or whatever you want to do. So this is a fairly easy way to manipulate the file and adjust it and customize it to your needs and your campaigns as your campaign evolves. The bad thing is that the whole file is 30,000 pixels across. So this is a large Photoshop format file, so you need Photoshop. I don't think there are any other software right now that can actually open a file that is 10 gigabyte in size. But I will chop up the file into pieces, that each piece will be small enough that they will be in standard Photoshop formats. You can open them in GIMP, that is a free software, or some other. There are probably a dozen other tools that you can use to edit it that has the capability of using layers and masks. And I can also reduce the resolution, but then that defeats the purpose a little bit, because if the resolution will be lower, then roads were not really visible and buildings will also not be visible. So we're working kind of on an edge between large overland maps and more of a city village map scale. So this is a bit of a tech demo, what's possible to do. So if you have a powerful computer and you have Photoshop, this is an awesome way of getting a customizable version of the map that you can make your own. And If you don't have a powerful computer and don't have Photoshop, then you will be able to use the files this large map made into separate files and pieces. So I will chop it up to probably about 6 pieces or so that you can actually use, and then you can use them, and they will all be available for my patrons that have access to the advanced content that will be at the $5 level or above. So thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for supporting my Patreon. Thank you. Bye.